we're now going to have a bit of time to respond to some of the issues which came up, and then in a few minutes we'll open up the floor to questions. For me, the question that I'm left with, having heard your words this morning, or at least one of the questions, is about this notion of choosing for yourself which bits of the room you visit, choosing your playlist, having the need to start your own thing rather than join in something that was established by a previous generation. And my question to you is, do you need other Jews to be Jewish? Or do you need other Jews to be Jewish like you are in order to be Jewish in the way that you want to be? Do you need people to have the same playlist on their iPod as you? Or is it okay that yours is absolutely individual to you? In other words, is one of the arbiters of the new Judaism a significant number of like-minded Jews? Or can a single person define a Judaism for themselves that's totally independent of others? And Jay is looking most enthusiastic to respond.
Thanks. Sure. I mean, in a sense, of course, we need other Jews to do Jewish. I think there's that notion that's been fashionable for the last couple of years in the Jewish institutional world of peoplehood. People, it seems to me, in a certain way, the lowest common denominator. We can't agree on anything else. Is Judaism a religion? Well, not really. Is it this? Is it that? Well, like Kurt Vonnegut said about what's the meaning of life. Well, we're here to help each other get through this thing, whatever it is. And that seems to be all right. I think the model, I'll go back to one of my metaphors, which was the food court model. The idea is that we do it together. For a while, particularly when my Jewishness was mostly around spirituality, I was looking for the guru, right? So who was going to be the teacher who would get each of the parts of me all in one? And I've long since given that up. I think there's the piece of me that's here and the piece of me that's there. Hopefully I can build community with people who have some of those pieces in common. But it's not an assumption that, well, I like the idea of the Ikarim, of the principles, but in a way, I'm not sure what any of them, besides the ones that are platitudes, like the really meaty ones, it's hard to identify what those would be that would really be so broad that I could find common cause. So for me, it's always going to be different principles that I have in common with someone else. I think, Danya said maybe there's nothing, or I think Danya said there's nothing new under the sun. I think Twitter is new, right? I mean, I do think that social media is new, and I think the way that we can construct communities as a result of being so wired is new and is really important. I guess the last piece for me is the rap against new Jew identity is that this is narcissistic, individualistic, it's not serious, and it's just do whatever you want. I just got a takedown. It was great because I was taken down anonymously, so I wasn't even, I was quoted as one prolific writer, but not by name in an article in Commentary Magazine. So I will come out as being the one prolific writer that was taken down in Commentary Magazine as saying that what authenticity has to do with is in a sense the authenticity of the choice, rather than a mythic pseudo-authenticity that I can, well, this is what's real because this is what's been handed in this particular way. The notion that it's not just what I feel like. It's not just, well, today I feel what's authentic is to wear this jacket and tomorrow is to wear that jacket. It has to be about the reality of the discernment process and the idea that what's authentic is the maintenance of the system that actually is producing results, that's actually yielding something, that's actually doing something. It's kind of a pragmatic or a functionalist approach, whether it's religious practice or cultural practice, rather than a sort of mythic one. And for me, that is I guess to pick up on Rosenzweig, that is a human imperative. That to be authentic and to be whole in one's identity may today mean the 180-degree opposite of inheriting that identity from a pre-existing structure. Maybe.
It's an old-fashioned comment, which I'll throw to that side of the room. I mean, might the core principles be Shabbat and Kashrut, or do they just drop off the playlist if they're not as fun as film festivals?
Well, I think, I mean, to respond to that and to Jay and the original question, there are certain prayers in the tradition that you can't say if you are not in a quorum of 10 Jews. I think built into the fabric of Judaism is the concept of community and what that community looks like and on what terms and who's allowed to count in a minyan and all of this. You know, there are a lot of questions that go with that, but I disagree that you can sort of be entirely, you know, in this world here, in this world here, in this world here, in this world here, and that's going to add up to something comprehensive. Part of what Judaism is supposed to do, I think, is transform you, change who you are. And how that happens is when sometimes you are pushed to do something that's not very comfortable. When you might say, well, I'm committed to this concept of Shabbat, but ooh, I really feel like doing this thing that in theory, you know, oh, I feel like watching a movie right now. I'm traditionally Shabbat observant. You know, for somebody else for whom that's their concept of Shabbat, fine. But for me, that moment when I say no, and I have to sit with the discomfort of whatever really uncomfortable emotion is going on inside under the surface that I'm trying to avoid, when I let that come up and actually face it, something interesting really happens. And when I'm in community, even with people who I don't always necessarily like or who don't necessarily get the multiplicity of, you know, that I contain, the multitudes that I contain, something interesting happens. And obviously there are communities and teachers and whatever that can be toxic, but in a healthy community there are going to be conflicts. And being forced to sit still and work through those conflicts and to move past some initial place where it doesn't seem like there's, you know, warm, fuzzy, lovey connection can be transformative for the individual and the collective. And I think we do ourselves a disservice if we allied that.
So if I may, I'll follow up on a quote from Levinas. Levinas, as you most know, was a French Jewish philosopher that said that when you start questioning your identity, it probably means that you have already lost it. And I think it has some to say with what we're talking about here today. First of all, I believe that Judaism is everything that we're talking about here because it's a question of values. And Judaism has been the first religion and with a sense of peoplehood that has been talking about the values of treating the other one right, of making, of having harmony within ourselves. The whole concept of the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, the whole balance, the fact that we are earthly, we're human, and on the other hand, there's a spirituality that is also embedded in each and every one of us. And that this battle that happens every day is one that you can't take for granted. So I think this also has to do with what we're talking about. The fact that we have lots of colors of Judaism today, but at the end of the day, what matters is to stay involved, to stay committed, and to know that the values of Jews, no matter where you come from, Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, Sephardic, Ashkenaz, whatever your color is, we are all embarking into one path, which is to make sure that the world is a better place. So going again, this is from universal to particular. If you respect Shabbat and somebody else doesn't, who is a better Jew? We'll find out after we're gone from this planet or from this world. And that will be a question to be answered then. But in the meantime, what I think makes a lot of sense is that we all stand as united as possible, that we all understand that we are intertwined in terms of our destiny. And again, staying positive, that we're much better off today than we've been ever in our history.
I mean, while we're talking about our intertwined destiny, I mean, in some ways we've got very different conversations happening here. And while the Americans are talking about food court Judaism, you weren't. In fact, in Israel, you know, we're not headed to the food court so we can sit and eat together. We're headed increasingly to different dining rooms. So what do you have to say about where they're at with their conversation?
I'm listening. It's not my life, you know. I'm definitely very, very Jewish. I'm sure about that. I take most of my Jewishness. I used to be observant, and now I'm not. I feel even like in the Israeli newspaper, when there's one Jewish guy on one sports team from somewhere in the world, they're going to say that, and he's a Jew. The soccer player on this team is a Jew. You know, so we're always very aware of who's Jewish, where, and why. And I can also say, I was telling David earlier, that my band, when we first had our first show overseas, it was in England in 2004. Since then, luckily, we've had hundreds of shows overseas, and it's my favorite part of the business. But anyway, it was in England in a Jewish students' convention. So we were all very happy to have somebody pay for us to perform in England, but we were also like, we felt we were cheating because we're performing for Jews. It's not a real show overseas because it's in a Jewish convention. But I can say that all of us, starting that show and until now, when we perform for Jewish students, and this is also like, I was thinking about it when Danya spoke, because when they try to make the JCC sexy, they bring Hadak Nachash, you know? And I can tell you that from our side, you're talking about a crisis in the Jewish infrastructure. I don't feel it, but from our side, we feel great in these shows. We're past already the time that we think it's cheating. We also have other shows now. We do festivals for whoever comes, but we like both kinds, and it's a special audience for us, you know, even if they don't speak a word of Hebrew. So that's what I have to say.
Okay, I'm going to go to Yehuda for 1 minute, and then we're going to open up the
I just
floor
want
to
to
questions.
put your last two questions together because I think they're at the heart of the issue. I'm not convinced at all that Shabbat is or should be an ikar of the Jewish people, and I don't think it really ever has been except in some sort of default way. But I do think that when you link to the second question and asking Shannon about Israel and the Jewish community, that's a place at which a serious ikar conversation might actually take place. One of the obviously really challenging trends in the North American Jewish community is the ways in which, I don't know about distancing of American Jews from Israel, but certainly the ways in which Israel is becoming segmented out as something different than what it means to be Jewish. And I think that's one of those areas where we say, let's actually take that as an ikar, allow for a lot of pluralism, individualism, and so on, and actually make that part of a conversation about ikarim. But I guess the flip side, Shannon, is that that actually has to take place here as well, that it can't be Israelis looking at an American Jewish conversation about food court, spirituality, and so on, and saying, that's not our problem. But actually saying, you know what, we're kind of invested in this in the same way, and what are the things that we as Israelis have to put on the table? What are the things that we as American Jews have to put on the table in order to belong to the same set of ikarim?
And also, one of the things that we might think about as we open up the questions to the floor is, of course, I mean, I talked about this American-Israeli conversation, but of course, not everyone in America is interested in Jay's eye spirituality. And of course, if we look at the research published by the New York Federation in Haaretz last week and other places, then we'll see the huge rise in Orthodoxy and in specifically ultra-Orthodoxy and Chabad in America, in New York, is also in some ways going counter to this trend. So we have to be aware of, in some ways, how limited this conversation is when we're talking about the wider Jewish world and the trends within it.